morning, group. I'd like today to introduce you to James. This is James. Have I spelled your last name right? Moran, is that right?
Moran. Yes,
Moran, yeah. He's an archetypal astrologer living in DC, the USA. He's a writer. He does nonfiction, fiction, poetry, plays. He does a whole lot of things. You must have a strong Mercury in your chart. So I'm going to hand over to James, and he's here today to talk about the field of astrology that he's passionate about, and take it away.
Yeah, great. So I'm an archetypal astrologer, and yeah, I can kind of explore whatever angle you'd like. Shall I talk about how I got into it, or what?
Yeah,
what
no,
like?
excellent.
Yeah.
You know, the journey to becoming an astrologer is usually quite an interesting one.
Sure. So I was interested in spirituality when I was actually a teenager, and I got exposed to the work of someone named Stan Grof, who was actually a researcher, a psychological researcher in the field in the 50s, 60s, and 70s that had to do with holotropic states of consciousness, like research into psychedelic healing. And I was very much interested in that. And I actually went and I studied with him on the East Coast. I went to college on the West Coast of the United States to study with him. And when I was on the West Coast, I did a study abroad in India. And I got very, very much interested in yoga, meditation. I kind of forgot about the whole psychedelic assisted therapy thing and just focused on that. And then when I was in my early 30s, a childhood friend of mine was like, "Oh, you should check out astrology." And I was like, I never thought I would be into astrology, but he was a friend, so I decided to check it out. And I picked up a book by Richard Tarnas called Cosmos and Psyche, and I read it.
That book.
Yeah, and I got completely turned on. You know, I got like, it actually felt like the symbolic language of astrology was familiar to me. It felt like a kind of a coming home. And then I discovered that Richard Tarnas was a protege of Stan Grof, the psychedelic assisted researcher. And I ended up studying with both of them in California. And I discovered that archetypal astrology, the genesis of archetypal astrology, was that the researchers exploring psychedelic assisted therapy with study participants were looking for a tool that could help them anticipate the type of material that would come up from the subconscious mind in kind of these depth healing sessions with holotropic states, which was basically like psychedelic assisted healing states. And somebody suggested astrology, and they were kind of hesitant at first, but they checked it out, and that ended up being the tool, any more so than any Western psychological tool, to help them anticipate the material. Not only that, it could help them kind of reflect back on the whole life of the individual by looking at the birth charts to help understand how that material fit in the larger arc of symbolism and meaning and themes of that person's life. And they really discovered that they had kind of a map of the psyche of the human being, the human psyche. And that was the genesis of archetypal astrology. And that was just so fascinating to me. I became an archetypal astrologer, and I dedicated my life to it.
I get that. And that's exactly what an astrology, your birth astrology chart is. It is a map. It's exactly that. Like, I often call it your GPS, guidance system. And
totally.
and you have you, the person, is behind the wheel directing where to go.
Yeah, it's like, it has a kind of a very practical application to us, because it's kind of the cheat sheet. It's the map, it's the GPS that can help us understand, like, for instance, transits helps us understand where we're at right now. Yes. It's like when you're in GPS, you're in a car, and it's like, you're in a neighborhood. How do I get here? How do I navigate through it? And it helps you with that. And then in a larger sense, it's like, it's kind of showing us that the outer space, we're looking at where the planets were when you were born. That's the outer space is reflective of the inner space. So it kind of has a larger implication too, that there's a kind of we're not just really isolated individuals in a kind of estranged individuals in a kind of like a material universe that is devoid of meaning. That external space and the inner space reflect each other. Not only that, there's a kind of a benevolent backdrop to the universe, in the sense that it's given us a cheat sheet. You know, it gave us something to look into ourselves and to help us, help us guide ourselves.
It's almost like you've got, you have the exam, but the astrology is the answer sheet.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Life is a test.
Yes.
And the universe has given us, it's helping us. It's like it's helping us through the test. It's almost like it has a sense of compassion, because life is very testing.
Challenging.
It's like challenging. Life really is meant to like challenge us, and yet there's this benevolent offering of this kind of map. It's almost like a tough hike. We're on a tough hike, and lo and behold, we have a map, so we can anticipate what's ahead and understand where we're at.
And of course, when you get to the top of that tough hike, been on a couple of those, Nepal, mountains here in New Zealand, been on a couple of those. It's hard work, but when you get to the top, the view is just breathtaking.
Right.
And you get this sense of, oh my God, did I do that?
Yeah. Wow,
there's a huge sense of satisfaction and contentment when you sort of get it, And I'm not just talking about climbing a hill or anything. I'm just talking about life in general.
Totally. Life in general anything in life. Could be writing a book, could be writing an article or something too. It's similar for me, at least.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah.
So, as a client, if a client came to you and they came to you for your service as an archetypal astrologer, I know you've talked about it in essence, but how would somebody benefit from having an archetypal reading?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you a breakdown of kind of how it tends to unfold when someone comes to me. So there's a couple different angles that someone can come. So one is to just understand more about themselves. To just understand more about themselves. That's really the focus of archetypal astrology. So what they do is they'd book a reading with me, and we'd sit down and we'd, basically give them a general rundown of, they don't need to know astrology. We'll give them a general rundown of what the charts are, generally look at a birth chart and the current transit chart now through the next year. And then we get to know each other. We talk about their life, get to know about kind of the arc of their life, the themes of their life. And then we refer back to the charts, and the charts give us insights into the themes of their life. And that's very helpful in a number of ways. One is, we all tend to kind of have like patterns that we move in, and kind of like ways that we repeat patterns in life that we might want to change, might want to release, might want to get out of, step above, something like that. And so the insight from the charts helps us understand, like, what are the dynamics underlying, like, like the dynamics in my psyche, in my kind of depth of my own spiritual unfolding that are underlying this. What is it trying to tell me? Why is it happening? What is it trying to tell me? And that insight is actually very freeing. So there's that. There's also the transits helps us understand, like, when we look at those patterns, we look at the birth chart. The birth chart is looking at the whole life. Transits is looking at a window of time. Usually people are interested in looking at now through the next year. And so it helps us understand, like, okay, those are the patterns of my larger life. Where am I in my kind of evolution, personal evolution right now? Like, what are the themes that are up right now? How do I navigate them? What can I anticipate in terms of timing? Like these 3 months. Sometimes it's actually very helpful when people are really going through tough transits to know the arc of the transit, that, it's not going to last forever. It comes in, it goes out. And so that's transits. So generally speaking, that's one type of client coming towards me, is like, just want to have a session to really understand more about the dynamics of their life and get some insight. Another type of client is somebody who's actually actively engaged in a depth healing process, a deep kind of accelerated psychospiritual growth process. That could be with psychedelic assisted healing or something like it, breath work, depth psychotherapy, vision quest, pilgrimage. There's all different types of modalities of kind of engaging in a kind of intensive period of psychospiritual growth. And the charts of archetypal astrology, or at least the practice of archetypal astrology, is almost cater-made for that, because the genesis of archetypal astrology is that Richard Tarnas, Stan Grof, they came up with it when they were looking at people that were going through psychedelic assisted healing. So they were using the charts specifically to help the researchers understand the dynamics, and then to help participants to also understand their own dynamics. So it's specifically kind of catered towards that. So if somebody was to come to me, like kind of trying to find out something that wasn't really in line with that, like it wasn't really having to do with self-awareness or kind of going into a period of psychospiritual evolution, you know, like more like, how many kids am I going to have? When am I going to get the new job or something like that? It's not, you know, it's archetypal astrology is not the best school of astrology for that. You know, there's others, there's a panoply. Yeah, there's so many different kind of exactly tradition schools of astrology.
Yeah, exactly.
So archetypal astrology is kind of has a specific function and focus, and one of the trademarks of it is that when Richard Tarnas was using the charts to help anticipate this healing process or to help people reflect and understand what they went through, he had such a specific goal in mind. He had to figure out which aspects of the chart, birth chart, transit chart, actually go quickest to that insight. And he found the positions of the celestial bodies, the planets, and their angular relationships to each other. So that's called planets and alignments or aspects. Yep. So that's the focus of archetypal astrology. As we know in astrology, there's houses, there's signs. That's a part of archetypal astrology, but the main focus at the fore, kind of the priority, is really the planets, which each one has an archetypal symbolism, and then the alignments that combine those symbolisms.
So that's so basically, it's how the planets talk to each other.
Yeah, it's how exactly how the planetary archetypes kind of reconcile their symbolism, and so it becomes, it's a little bit of a pared down approach to astrology, because astrology is so vast, and you might have different schools that place the houses in different places or place the signs in different places, but you're always going to have the planets in the same place. The position of planets in the sky when you're born, it's not going to change.
Exactly.
Angular alignments between them, it's not going to change. More or less, the symbolism and the understanding of the symbolism of them is not really going to change between schools. So that's the backbone right there, archetypal astrology.
What do you love most about the practice of archetypal astrology?
Wow, that's a great question. I love many things, and I'll tell you what I love most. So there's a lot of things I love. Like, for instance, I love that I can really help people. It's kind of really cool to see the aha moments of, you know, when people kind of just really get what is going on and beneath the surface in themselves, or even in the world. There's something called world transits. You can look at world transits, and that helps us understand the dynamics in the world and the headlines and the news. And people really click. They're like, wow, I kind of get it. So it's helping people. So that's great. And I love that. And I love it's so fascinating to me that we can see into the psyche. You know, we can see into in an individual's reality. You know, you can kind of see into the world and how they see the world. With psychedelic assisted healing, you know, powerful things come up. And when those things reaffirm the insights of astrology, that's also fascinating. I think probably the most exciting thing for me is that the planetary archetypes, you know, in the ancient days, they called them gods and goddesses. The word archetype is used in this sense of archetypal astrology as a kind of a fundamental building block of the experience of reality. And so when I see a transit in my own life and a client, or in the world and a world transit, which means like an alignment of the archetypes, and then they show up, it's that same conversation you're talking about, through events, through emotions, through situations, they coalesce into this kind of meeting of archetypes and this reconciliation of archetypal energies. And as an astrologer, you can witness it and see how reality is unfolding according to these divine archetypes, and then it just becomes like a utterly fascinating celebration of the divine,
I
because
get
it's just
that.
like, wow.
I often say to my students that I see things with astrology eyes.
Yeah,
And I
awesome.
know it's a real weird way of living. And they say, oh, I can't wait till I start to see things with astrology eyes. I say, you will, it'll come. But,
That's amazing.
everything that you see, when you see something on the news, the kind of energy that's involved. And you understand it from a planetary perspective, which is really quite fascinating.
In the archetypal tradition, we call it archetypal eye. Same thing, like astrology eye is the archetypal eye.
Yeah.
I know you shared your chart with me, before this interview, and I know I think you're born with a Mercury Neptune conjunction. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's like a classic. The Mercury has to do with the perception, and then the Neptunian, that's like a kind of, it's almost like the well of archetypal symbolism, like the collective unconscious. So it's like you got particularly adept capabilities there. So
it's no surprise that I'm an astrologer.
yeah and also the writing part, like you being a writer.
Yes,
there's a lot. It's like a sun. You got a sun. The sun and Mercury and Neptune are all together, like in your first house.
Yeah.
A lot of, Mercury has to do with writing, in a sense, like communicating a message. Neptune has to do with a lot of like inspiration, like kind of channelings, like kind of like sense of divine inspiration, enchantment, that can really kind of entrance people. It's common with writers, like Stephen King was born with that one. He's the horror aspect is like reflected elsewhere in his chart, but the Mercury Neptune aspect shows this like outpouring of, he's just got this kind of flowing thing where he's a writer and the words just keep flowing out. He keeps publishing books, and it's amazing.
The funny thing, growing up, I never could see myself as an author. Never.
Really?
I never passed an English exam. I'm dyslexic, so I've always had problems with my English. Wow. And my writing. All my letters were back to front. So my perceptions on how with words, it's not like everybody else's. Whereas symbolism really works really well for me. And how I got my first book, Learn to Self-Heal. I was lying in bed one day in Foxton, and it's a little country part here of New Zealand. I was lying there in bed, and my dad and his twin, they were alive at the time, and they were at the breakfast table. And I was lying in bed, and I was thinking about it, really been about 8 o'clock in the morning. And I got this thought, and I know it possibly wasn't my thought, it was just inspiration, as you were saying. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to write a book. Just like that. It came out of nowhere. And that is typical of Neptune. Oh, it's also Uranus, I suppose. But came out of nowhere. I got to the kitchen table. I was so excited. I said, I'm going to write a book. It's going to be 24 chapters. It's going to be this and this. And of course, once you start the writing process, you realize 24 chapters is a lot. And, so I had to really bring it down. So I brought it down and divided it into 4 separate sections as a reflection of my work and my studies in life and that kind of thing. So that's how my first book came about. And my second book just came about as a offshoot of the first one, as things usually do. But it wasn't actually, they weren't planned.
Yeah. Wow.
They just went, woof. I thought, oh,
totally Neptunian.
And off I went.
Yeah. That's cool. And I think you have, I think you have Uranus square sun too.
I do.
Like Uranus in that tense alignment with the sun, which is also kind of spontaneous, energy.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but if you had said to me at 20, are you going to be, would you ever consider being a writer? I would have gone, no way, not doing that. Can't spell. How the hell am I supposed to write?
Wow, amazing.
But then I thought to myself, when I was going through this process, I thought, isn't that what manuscript writers and editors are for? All I've got to do is get the words out.
Yeah.
Totally. They're the ones that format it and get it all ready for publication.
Totally.
Except I self-published, so it kind of fell on me.
Yeah, I mean, and at the same time, we can always edit later. You know what I mean? Like that initial flow of inspiration is like a channeling. It's like that in and of itself is a kind of a sacred art or something, I feel like, at least.
Yeah, so that was, you know, there's an example there of the Neptune Mercury in play.
That's amazing. That's so cool. Yeah.
And of course, you may have noticed in my chart, I've got Mercury, Pluto in mutual reception.
Let me take a look here. Yes, that's right. That you do.
So it kind of tends the flavor of the kind of books that I write. So they're all about, you know, healing. And even my book, Your Astrological Health, is also a book geared towards healing, you know, looking at your sun, moon, ascendant, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, it's all about transforming the self.
Transforming the self. Wow, cool. Yeah.
Which is, yeah, Pluto.
Yeah, Pluto, the archetype of transformation, depth. Yep. Yeah.
So, you know, it is really, as you were saying, and it's not only picking up the fact that you are a writer in anybody's chart, but you can also pick up the kind of books you can actually be writing. And again, that was not planned. It was just where the flow went.
Totally. Wow.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, the charts can be so affirming, because sometimes it's like, if we have an experience in life that is not, it's kind of out of the ordinary, you know, as what we assume is the ordinary, as we pick up from kind of like a mainstream perception, you know, we can have experiences and we're like, what, you know, not really having anything to legitimate it and feeling it's a little bit oddball or something. And then the charts can really affirm, like, no, this is a part of your natural energy, and this is flowing exactly how it should. And it can feel just so nice. You know, it's kind of like, you know, it's as if we've been wearing clothes the wrong size our whole life, and then we try it on, it's the right size. It's like, oh, this actually exists. Like it you know, like there is a way to live that's in resonance with my nature.
And I liked what you just said. You said the chart can affirm. It kind of gives you permission in a way,
right?
That you can actually be this, if you've got strong Uranus in your chart, that you can actually be this weird, crazy kind of self person, you know, because that's is actually where you are. When you try to conform and fit in, you don't feel well, because that's not where your energy sits. So in a way, you know, I really liked that statement, that it, you know, your chart affirms who you are.
Wow, so amazing. You know, there's actually something really fascinating that happens sometimes in people's lives, is that there's aspects of the chart that are sometimes like not fully digested. Maybe they don't, you know, they like, as we grow through life, we don't know anything about, say we don't know anything about astrology. We're all doing this. We all grow through life, and we all are like trying to figure ourselves out, figure our life out, kind of reconcile the challenges, and we're all kind of feeling our way through. The chart is a helper. It helps us see our way and helps us in that process. And everybody, whether they know astrology or not, or most people, a lot of people, there's this interesting phenomenon that happens, is that aspects of themselves reflect in the chart, whether they know it or not, aspects of themselves that they haven't quite digested, haven't quite understood, sometimes end up showing up outside of them. They show up outside of them as people, things that are kind of challenging them in one way or another. It can be all different types of ways challenging them. But looking at the chart, realize that's kind of like, your life isn't just what happens beneath your skin. You know, like your life is the storyline of your life. And what life is doing is it's putting a challenge in front of you, because it's challenging you to embody that energy yourself. And usually when we understand it, we embody it, that thing from outside, that manifestation from outside goes down. It's not as prominent anymore. And so it can happen in all different types of ways. I mean, a classic way has to do with Mars aspects. Mars aspects has to do with like forceful action, the archetypal forceful action. And oftentimes the extent that we don't own our own Mars on the positive end of the spectrum has to do with bravery, assertiveness, in the sense that, that to the extent that we don't own our own, these challenges keep popping up outside, people challenging us, things challenging us, like to stand up for ourselves. And it's like, I mean, it's the content of so many movies, you know, kind of a classical story of somebody who's kind of like wilting or something, and they keep getting these challenges, and by the end they finally stand up and they say no more. That's like the integration.
Along the same vein of that, I see a lot of Mars retrograde or Mars in not what I call a planet that's not in good condition. Right. I see a lot of that in people that have gone through abuse, especially battered women. I've had a few charts like that, and the Mars is always, in a difficult connection with other planets or not in a good condition itself. And of course, when you are in an abuse relationship, any kind of abuse relationship, abuse is not okay. It is about you taking back your power and standing up and taking action around it, which is all what Mars is about.
Totally. Yeah. Amen.
That's amen to that. So James, I love the work that you do, and thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today. Tell me, how can people contact you?
They can go to my website, which is my name, www.jamesmoran.org. My last name is Moran. I can go there. You can go to the Archetypal News Network channel on YouTube. That's one that my colleagues, Archetypal Astrologers, myself set up. A lot of cool updates about planet, what the planet's going through right now, and with transits. So you can go there. You can find me on Facebook, James Moran Astrologer, Instagram, Astrology James. But yeah, the website, you can go there and you can book a reading. You can check out book a reading. I have a collection of my published writings there as well. So it's all there.
Isn't it great doing what you love to do?
It is. Yes. Amen again. It's such a blessing.
Actually, I heard that for the first time when I was a lot younger. I used to watch Oprah Winfrey, and she's got a strong Gemini focus in her chart. And she said, and one of the things she said resonated with me. She said, you work most of your life, so you might as well do something that you love to do. Wake up in the morning knowing that you're going to love going to your job, rather than just having to go because life dictates you need to get the kids through school or pay the mortgage.
I know.
Work at your passion and make it your own.
That's a great quote. Oh, yes, exactly. It's true, because you're going to spend so much energy. I mean, that's part of our existence. That's like the Saturnian archetype principle. We all have to play a role. We all have to have some responsibility. We all have to have a job and labor and toil. So you might as well, you might as well
enjoy it.
Yeah, make your way towards that which you can put your all into.
Totally agree. James, thank you for being here today. I know it's what time is it over there in the US now?
This is August 14th. It's like close to 8 p.m. It's the evening time here.
Okay, so
I'm behind you, I think.
Okay. Day behind. All right. So thank you, James. We may catch up with you again at a later date when we get into Authors Month.
Oh, great. Look forward to it. Thank you so much for having me.
Blessings.
All right, Christina.
Namaste.